Hello fellow YouTubers, this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music, and here's the completed cue that we started on Darth Vader's theme, or the Imperial March. So here we go. And in this cue, we have, it was actually produced from the score by John Williams. So here we have the first 6 measures. And if you'll notice from some of the previous scores, we added in piccolo and oboe 1 and 2. And also we have violin, your string section, basically. And then going measure 7 on up, 7 to 12, we have your winds, then your brass, your horns, trumpets, trombones, bass trombone, tuba, which is another instrument that occurred later on in the cue, which we've included. Timpani, snare drum, triangle, bass drum, and cymbals, which is actually piatti. And then we also added a harp that will come in, I believe, in measure 17 or so. So here we have measure 13 through 16. And there's the harp, I guess, coming in measure 16. And then the cue pretty well runs its full course, at least that well-known theme, up to measure 20. And that's where it ends, and then it goes into a quieter part of the cue, less climatic part of the cue at that point. So in creating this mini mock-up, you want to balance your woodwinds, your brass, your percussion, your harp, and your strings. Harp actually is considered part of the strings, but I have it separately here since the score had it separately. So here we go. Let's listen to the woodwinds. So there we had the piccolo coming in measure 20. Then we have our brass. Let's listen to the brass, which is pretty well present in most of the cue. And then we have the percussion. Let's listen to that. And then after that, let's take a look at, we'll go ahead and do the harp and strings together. And in listening to the strings, it sounds to me like they're a little bit compressed too much. So one way to rectify that, getting into the mixing aspect of it, is to go into the mixer. And if you'll notice, I have the strings, brass, percussion, and woodwinds on collective channels. So let's go ahead and bring the strings down, and also correspondingly everything else down by about the same number of dBs. And then let's listen to the strings at -4. So that's sounding a little better now. Now, as far as the actual reverb that was used, let's go ahead and take a look at the room the instruments were positioned in. And here's our room right here. It's the Berlin Teldeck studio. And you can see the stage. And actually, as you play the cue, you can see the different instruments coming in. So watch the beginning, you'll see the string section come in. We have our violins and violins 1 and 2 on the left of the stage, violas and cellos on the right. Then we have our woodwinds between, at the next level, we have piccolos, clarinets, flutes, oboes, sort of spread across the stage in concert order. Then you have your contrabass along with the strings. Further at the back, your tubas, trombones, bass trombones, and your trumpets and your horns sort of in the middle back of the stage. And you can move those around easily. Then you have your piatti back there on the stage. And the further you move them back, just like in real life, it takes the instruments and reduces the distance from the conductor, from the microphone. And so it actually does lessen the volume a little bit as you place them either close or further away from the microphone, which is right here. So let's listen. So there we have the stereo spread in Vienna Mirror Pro, which allows us to do that. So we've looked at the score, we've looked at the instruments, and last time I went over the different instruments that were used in the cue. We did have a couple of new ones. In the woodwinds, we had the piccolo. And for that, I used the Vienna instrument, basically the Vienna Symphonic Library, in particular the piccolo. So, and then we already had the flutes, the oboe. That was also Vienna Symphonic Library. All the instruments used were Vienna Symphonic Library. So here we see we have oboe 1, and then oboe 2 is actually a different oboe, oboe 2. So they do have 2 individual solo oboe instruments. So right now the oboe is being played in the Teldex Hall. So as you look at the oboe, you can see it shaded right there. Here's the clarinet. So in the hall, you see the circle being grayed out a little bit, as you can see it. Now, if I can zoom in, and if I take this little slider, you can increase or decrease the volume. This lets you move the position of it. Now notice if I move it over to the left, you can hear it changing its position in the stereo. It's more of a left pan. You can also increase the stereo spread within the hall. And of course, you can do that for each of the instruments. So in our brass, we didn't add any new instruments other than the tuba. So let's take a look at the tuba. I probably should have given a little bit more volume to the tuba. So that's an adjustment I can make in the mix. And also, if we go into the hall, we see the tubas up there on the right, next to the, right there. So they're increasing the volume. Can do that right in the Vienna Pro. And let's see, we had percussion from the last time we looked at the instruments. I believe we already had, of course, the timpani snare drum. We may have added the triangle. So let's take a look at that again in Vienna Symphonic Library. So it was actually in percussion, add percussion preset, and then you have triangle. You also have other instruments, castanets, waterphone, log drum, and so on. So it's actually in this array here, the top one. And if we look in our hall, we see it's in the percussion section, right at the top there. Really pierces through the mix. Then also we have our piatti, which we had before, and bass drum, which we had before. The harp was new in this section of the cue, came in later in the cue. Whoops, that's not a harp, is it? Okay, so here we go. So again, Vienna Symphonic Library, harp. And they do have two individual harps. So if you have a cue with two harps, you can use two distinct ones so you don't get cancellation of any kind. And then the strings, those we all saw from the previous cue when we went into the first introduction to this theme. So that pretty well covers the end of the cue as far as we go. All of the information was added in Sibelius, and that completed the cue pretty much, that Darth Vader theme. So this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music. If you like this video, please click like. If you have any questions or comments, please question or comment. And if you wish to be notified of upcoming videos, please subscribe. So this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music, signing off.